distancing to 6 feet. We welcome you to take your masks off at this time. We have a pretty packed agenda for tonight. There's really two sessions. One is organized presenters in the first hour. The second would be a time for public comment. I do believe that there have been some spots already reserved for that public comment. We'd like for you to hold that at 3 minutes for public comment. What's kind of awkward for me as the timer is if you exceed that 3-minute mark, so I'd ask you to be respectful of that, and I'll try to find a good place where that might be a good cutoff. So those people that are timing me out there, if I go 3 minutes, 15 seconds, please don't hold that against me. So I will turn this over to Holly, and we will get started. But again, I appreciate everybody here. Just be respectful of everyone tonight, and be respectful of social distancing for those people that are here and might be concerned about their own health and safety. As you come to the microphone tonight, I should say this, give us a chance to wipe it down. It'll take us a few minutes, so just give us a little bit of opportunity there to get that wiped down.
Holly, before we get started, if I can just say something real fast. We just wanted to say this, and I'm going to say the same thing tomorrow night as well. The committee just wants to make it clear that there has been no proposed curriculum changes at this time. We're on an information gathering stage. So I know there's been some things going around online, of specific curriculum and what it included. And there has been no proposal at this time. We are just gathering information as a committee. So I'm going to say the same thing tomorrow night. But thank you for your time, and Holly, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, the first speaker we have this evening is Dr. Eric Beachy. Dr. Beachy is a family physician.
Good evening, members of the Vigo County School Board and the Vigo County community. My name is Eric Beachy, and I'm a local family physician. I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening regarding this vitally important topic that is before us. Before I begin, I need to make it clear that the opinions I present tonight are my own and are not intended to reflect the positions of my employer, Union Health System. For nearly 25 years, the Vigo County School Corporation has had the good fortune of having a medically sound and impactful curriculum called Creating Positive Relationships presented to its students as the sex education portion of its health curriculum. Now there is a movement afoot to expel this excellent curriculum from our schools and to replace it with a yet-to-be-identified alternative. I want to share why, as a local physician, I believe that this would be a terrible mistake. First, I understand that one of the claims put forward to justify removing Creating Positive Relationships from the Vigo County schools is that it is not medically accurate. I want to dispel this unjustifiable criticism from the outset. I have personally reviewed the CPR curriculum with particular focus on the 8th grade and high school levels, and I find the curriculum presented to be accurate, balanced, and vitally important. The CPR curriculum addresses a variety of issues with students, including foundational topics such as respect for oneself and others in the context of relationships, positive and negative aspects of peer influence, self-image and body image issues, healthy communication with adults and peers, wise and appropriate use of social media platforms, sexting, sexual extortion, and sexual addictions such as pornography. These are very real and fundamental issues that students deal with concerning sexuality, and they are presented in a compassionate manner in the CPR curriculum, which encourages students to believe truth about themselves, to treat everyone with the respect they are due, and to seek help from appropriate adults in their lives if they are struggling. The CPR curriculum also addresses issues specific to the relational and physical aspects of sexual activity. This information is presented in a clear, accurate, and compassionate manner. During the sequential presentation of the CPR curriculum, students are presented with accurate information relating to issues such as pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections, condom usage for STI prevention, and the relative efficacy of various types of contraception. Importantly, students are also accurately informed that the only fully reliable way to eliminate the risk of both social and physical adverse outcomes of sexual activity is abstaining from sexual activity until it is shared in the context of a committed and mutually monogamous relationship. This perspective is communicated appropriately and unashamedly, precisely because it is true. It is important to present other methods of risk reduction, such as condoms, contraceptions, etc., which the CPR curriculum does. However, it is also vitally important that these be accurately identified as risk reduction techniques, not risk elimination techniques, and also to truthfully present them as intended to reduce only the physical consequences of sexual activity, not the personal, relational, or psychological consequences. CPR does that. Many comprehensive sex education programs do not. Instead, they disingenuously imply to students that all consequences of sexual activity can be eliminated by methods that are, at their best, only capable of reducing a single aspect of those risks. There are many good reasons to teach our students that abstaining from sexual activity outside of a committed marriage relationship is the best course. First, and perhaps most simplistically, it is mandated by Indiana Code Title 20, Article 30, Chapter 5, Section 13, which states that throughout instruction on human sexuality or sexually transmitted diseases, an accredited school shall, number 1, require a teacher to teach abstinence from sexual activity outside of marriage as the expected standard for all school-age children. Number 2, include in the instruction that abstinence from sexual activity is the only certain way to avoid out-of-wedlock pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, and other associated health problems. And number 3, include in the instruction that the best way to avoid sexually transmitted diseases and other associated health problems is to establish a mutually faithful monogamous relationship in the context of marriage. From a medical perspective, we would consider this a preventive health intervention. It is rare indeed that we have health issues for which risk can be reduced to zero with a simple lifestyle adjustment. If we could eliminate the risk of diabetes, heart disease, or cancer by simply having patients avoid a specific activity, I and every other physician in America would unequivocally and dogmatically communicate that important information to our patients. No one would argue that we should dither about whether or not it is realistic or present alternative interventions that may partially reduce risk as viable and acceptable approaches. That would be called malpractice in my profession. We have a simple approach, abstinence, that eliminates risk for STIs, pregnancy, and the social and psychological consequences of sexual activity in students. It is imperative that this standard be clearly presented as the gold standard, unambiguously best approach. CPR does that and complies with applicable state law while doing so. As a family physician, I was trained to look at the health and well-being of a person from a more comprehensive perspective than the narrow lens that physical health affords us. We as people are more than just our bodies. Well-being is more than just physical health. True health is more than just the absence of physical disease. Instead, genuine health and well-being includes the social, psychological, and relational aspects of our lives as well. To neglect these is to reduce people to the level of animals. This is why I believe that a well-balanced curriculum such as CPR is so important. It places the physical aspects of sex education within the context of whole person wellness rather than presenting them as an isolated part of health. When CPR teaches students about things like the appropriate connection between physical intimacy and commitment in a relationship, or about the importance of healthy communication with parents and peers, or about the thoughtful and purposeful evaluation of one's personal values and beliefs about relationships, it is helping our students to develop an appropriate relational framework within which to think about sexual activity. When this is not done, and students are simply taught that it is their right and should be their expectation to seek sexual pleasure without regards to the potential lifelong implications of those activities for themselves or others, they are robbed of the opportunity to make truly informed decisions about how they want to live. In my practice, I see the consequences of this type of thinking all too often. Sexual decisions are a common source of regret and distress for patients. These regrets can be related to both the physical and psychological outcomes of sexual activity. I have patients living with the lifelong physical consequences of incurable STIs, such as HPV, herpes, and HIV. I also have patients living with the lifelong psychological consequences of broken relationships and the regrets of sharing the most intimate aspect of their lives with partners who proved unworthy of that trust. We must continue to teach our students that there is a better way. We must continue to teach them that sex is not a commodity that we will teach them how to safely exchange for pleasure, but rather an expression of affection and love so intimate and so personal that we will teach them how to appropriately reserve it for the context of a committed, loving, trusting relationship. Much is made of the concept of sexual freedom. Some say we should make it our goal to teach our children how to seek sexual pleasure in any manner and in any setting they desire, and to reduce, notice one cannot say eliminate, the risks of such behavior. This is a grave mistake on many levels: personal, community, and societal. Choices always have consequences. Actions always have consequences. Curricula always have consequences. We must continue to teach our students that they can have true freedom, not just the superficial and animalistic right to seek pleasure, but true freedom. As Matthew Kelly said, freedom is not just the ability to do whatever you want. Freedom is the strength of character to do what is good, true, noble, and right. As a medical professional reviewing the options, I believe that it would be a grievous mistake for the Vigo County School Corporation to abandon a curriculum that has served well to teach our students these truths for nearly 25 years. Let's not jettison a curriculum that seeks to teach our students more than just reducing the physical consequences of sexual activity, but rather helps them to cast vision in their own lives for healthy relationships, including the proper role of physical intimacy in those relationships. If we truly care about our students, we will care about them as more than just biological organisms. We will care about them as young people who are learning to navigate the complexities of a world that is full of misconceptions and misinterpretations of what sexual wholeness should look like. We will care about them enough to give them tools to navigate that world by recognizing and proactively developing healthy relationships. We will care about them enough to keep creating positive relationships in the Vigo County schools. It is a truly momentous decision that faces the Vigo County School Board. I urge you to retain the valuable resource that is creating positive relationships for our students. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ann Mishler. Ann is a certified nursing midwife.
Thank you to the school board and to the members of the community who have come to support the CPR program tonight. I am Ann Mishler, a retired nurse midwife, aka advanced practice nurse. I have worked in private and hospital-based practices caring for women for over 40 years. And currently I'm a volunteer at CPC as a healthcare provider for the past 4 years. My main role is to see young women at the clinic for pelvic exams, counseling, and education, as well as to treat infections when indicated and to refer for additional medical care as needed. The clients are all ages from puberty through menopause. As you might guess, I most commonly see STDs or STIs and other infections or simply address concerns of the clients who present to CPC. I'm surprised to see many clients who are unaware of how STDs and STIs are spread. Most present to the clinic for symptoms they are concerned about, reassurance after a known or suspected exposure, or for periodic testing. Testing, as the CPR program addresses, is recommended annually for those who choose to be sexually active. The CPR program is quite thorough at covering how STIs are spread. The difference between bacterial and viral STIs is covered, as well as the treatment. This program also is excellent for teaching responsible behavior and the value of establishing trust. It is discussed how important it is to inform one's partner of current and past infections. It is equally important that they know what infections their prospective partner has had or currently has. That is called respect and being responsible. It's very important that they know they can say no, and that prevention or saying no will avoid most consequences, both physical and emotional. Abstinence is a choice, the only choice that is 100% effective for prevention of STIs and pregnancy. When abstinence is not a choice, such as in the case of abuse, then reporting, evaluation, and treatment is important. Again, this is information included in the CPR program. The emphasis of the CPR program is primarily on good, positive relationships. It's a process which begins with developing friendship. This is an important part of a lifelong relationship. Kids often need help understanding how good relationships are more than temporal. The discussion of transmission of infection is much easier in an office when the client has been informed previously and already is aware of the process. We discuss known risks, meaning the client does not know her partner, does not know his or her sexual activity or history. She does know, but she's willing to take a risk. She might mistakenly think that using condoms will totally protect her, but that's not true. The CPR program also covers this information with a discussion as to prevention of STIs in pregnancy. The risk might be decreased, but they are not eliminated. Another part of STI/STD prevention is understanding exactly how both the infection and the diseases are spread. Blood and body fluids, skin-to-skin transmission, with specific examples of each are reviewed in the program. Most of the students have heard of chlamydia, herpes, AIDS, and more, but they don't know the difference in symptoms and how each infection or disease can be spread. The CPR program is specific in the examples they use and also discusses how testing is done and what treatment is indicated for each type of infection. Total prevention through abstinence is the gold standard. However, there is discussion about how to decrease risk. The importance of early detection and treatment is also emphasized. This means a good relationship with parents or a responsible adult they can trust to help facilitate testing and treatment. That also is very important. Social media, as we know, has become a very important part of most students' lives. They get a lot of information, both accurate and inaccurate, there. Kids often depend on their friends for information related to sex, rather than asking parents, a trusted adult friend, or their healthcare provider. The other place they go is Google, but it's more common now to ask friends on Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Fortnite, GarageBand, and all the others that are out there. This is risky, as sexting and pornography is everywhere. Kids get started looking at porn and soon they're attracted to it and they're spending hours per day looking at these sites on their phones, or worse yet, posting pictures or personal information about themselves. The CPR program addresses these risks and false or inaccurate information, and also addictions and safety issues, plus some legal considerations that many kids are not aware of and may be difficult to resolve. As you know, CPC is a faith-based clinic. However, clients are never forced into a discussion they don't want to have or agree with. The same is true of the instructors for the CPR program. The CPR program is medically based, and I have reviewed it also. as accurate information is given, and focuses on the protection of our youth in Vigo County by encouraging positive relationships. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Our next speaker on our list, Dr. Stephen Marlowe, clinical psychologist, is unable to be here in person, but we are going to phone him, and so he'll be able to address us through the telephone and the microphone.
Hello.
Good evening, Dr. Marlowe. You're on and we can all hear you.
Okay, great. I just want a few minutes here to discuss the concept of the adolescent brain. And first of all, I just want to start with, like, all of life is relationship. And it's about relationship. In regards to the adolescent brain, I don't think it's so much a question about a lack of knowledge. I think knowledge is out there. But the question is the brain developed enough to make a good judgment with the knowledge that we present to them? And the psychological aspect of adolescents' brains, with a sex education class, is often, and I think the real question to us is, are we encouraging or are we maybe even unwittingly participating in a sensation gathering or a thrill kind of seeking aspect? Because that rises a lot in early adolescence. Before adolescence, we really don't have much sensation seeking, but during adolescence, this increases dramatically, and it can increase a risk to healthy development. So it's kind of like teaching a curious thief how to steal. And I think we need to be careful about that, because the adolescent's brain is developing, our psychological data say, throughout childhood and adolescence and even into young adulthood. Some studies will say that the adolescent brain, or that the brain isn't developed even into the 20s or the 30s. And what we have is we have a limbic system in our brain that's dealing with emotions, and we have a lot of emotions, but then we have the frontal lobe, which is the judgment, the reasoning, and the impulsiveness. It's not fully developed until later. And a lot of these comprehensive sex education programs present what I would call faulty data, and faulty data can lead to faulty results. Just one quick little illustration is I believe the low-fat diets in our world have led to actually more heart disease and more diabetes in the last 20 to 40 years than otherwise. But the dorsal part of the frontal lobe, both bilaterally and in the posterior temporal occipital lobes, they don't develop until a later period of time. So we're often equipping a child with knowledge, but we're not equipping them with the ability to make the judgment. Because in the superior frontal regions of the brain, these are the regions that control the executive cognitive functioning, and they're important for us making good decisions. They have this late growth that occurs later, and the problems are really not a lack of knowledge, but they're a lack of judgment. I remember years ago when a certain president had some sexual difficulties, and was pretty famous for saying, "I did not have sex with that woman." But what we saw throughout the entire land was a large increase of sexual misconduct. And young children, as young as 5th and 6th graders, just weren't doing anything age appropriate in regards to their sexual conduct. And so when we talk about things, we might be opening a Pandora's box at too young of an age. And people don't know the damage that they might be doing. The knowledge is available to us. The knowledge is available on the internet. But the judgment is not available on the internet. The judgment has to be given through adults in people's lives. I would hope parents and teachers and people, adult friends, and people that they're close to, perhaps their pastors or good friends or the good neighbor next door who's got a logical and rational approach and has a good judgment. I also think that early sex education can lead to sexual abuse, because I think, like an example, just last week in my practice, 2 brothers had learned some sexual type of things And they taught a patient of mine how to be a woman, and they were having daily classes for years, and this was nothing other than real sexual abuse. But it's hard to determine what's the difference between sexual curiosity and sexual abuse. But this woman was struggling with these results even 20 and 30 years later. It seemed that as many as 1 out of 5 college women are raped, and I think that's a cause to early sexual knowledge without early sexual judgment. And as many as 80% of all women are sexually harassed. So I think that the most important thing that we would do is to teach abstinence. It's the only method that really is in keeping with the Indiana Code, and not to teach the comprehensive sex education, because I don't think there's an empirical evidence that says that that's necessarily any better than doing something like the CPR program already teaches. But it's very difficult to know where the age appropriateness is, and it's highly dependent upon each individual case. And I would be much rather hoping that the parents and perhaps, like we said, good adults would be able to help understand that. So I just want to close by saying that once you see something and once you experience something, you can't unsee it and you can't unexperience it. But I really think that the main aspect of this is the problem is not a lack of knowledge, but really it's a lack of judgment that's not available in that adolescent brain as of yet.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Marlowe. Thank you.
Dr. Marlowe,
All right,
give
you're
us
welcome.
Holly, do we know Dr. Marlowe's credential?
Yes, my apologies. Clinical psychologist.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Ashley Delanoy. Ashley is board certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Ashley Delanoy. I am a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, and I am licensed to treat individuals across the lifespan, meaning from age of birth until death. My main professional role includes gathering data related to a person's reported and observed mental health symptoms, performing a thorough assessment, and formulating a treatment plan that typically consists of psychotherapy and prescribed medication. I have been following information regarding the concepts of risk avoidance versus risk reduction in terms of sex education because of how immensely this directly impacts my adolescent patients. Whereas the information I am sharing is not reflective of my employer, I do have 4 children currently enrolled in Vigo County School Corporation schools. I wanted to share research and data with you that you may or may not have previously known. A series of related studies conducted by Sabia and colleagues reiterated what I would assume most of us already know. Delaying sexual activity increases the chances of high school graduation among girls and decreases the chances of STIs in both girls and boys. However, further studies performed by Meyer have begun showing a statistically significant association between sexual initiation age and depression among girls ages 11 to 18. The association was driven largely by girls who, number 1, had sex early relative to their peers, or number 2, broke up with a romantic partner in the same year they initiated sexual activity. This same data was then taken and evaluated 1 year later to reveal early age of sexual initiation being correlated with major depressive disorder among adolescents ages 14 to 18. In addition, A study conducted by Ohio State University researchers suggests that among adolescents and teens, poor mental health has a reciprocal relationship with casual sex, as each contribute to the other over time. This specific study found that teens who showed depressive symptoms were more likely than others to engage in casual sex. In addition, those who engaged in casual sex were more likely to later seriously consider suicide. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of sex education and mental health, but it speaks volumes to me. Every day, I witness the struggles an adolescent and their family report as a product of their depression, anxiety, or mood disorder. Additionally, every day, I hear from adults, many with coexisting mental health and substance abuse disorders, who report experiencing depression, anxiety, or mood that often began at a young age. Whereas I am in no means implying depression is solely caused by the age in which they engaged in sexual relationships, I am asking you to please take this research and correlation into account when trying to determine the best sex ed approach to take with our youth. Teens these days are facing completely different demons than you or I were at their age. Our goal as advocates for this population should be to teach them how to develop and foster healthy relationships, including how to cope with emotions surrounding sex. I believe we need to step back and reevaluate our goal. If our shared goal is to foster healthy brain development, self-confidence, and to potentially encourage choices that make a positive impact on our youth, then we really need to stop and think about how we can teach sex education in a way that eradicates further risk of mental health disorders. I have a hard time understanding how one could argue that risk reduction approaches to teaching sex education are actually reducing the risk of anything. This approach is actually increasing the risk of further aggravating or potentially even causing mental health complications. I firmly believe that adults who have the responsibility of making a decision that will directly impact the mental health of our youth need to put this first and foremost in their minds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Wayne Tarrant, Associate Professor of Mathematics at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Tarrant, and I am a tenured associate professor in the Department of Mathematics at Rose-Hulman. My area of study is in applied probability. I specifically think about risk, and have recently been considering the effects of education on poverty levels. Through Rose's portal resources for Indiana Science and Mathematics program, I have lectured multiple times for Vigo County School Corporation teachers and students. Education is very important to me. I've been asked to specifically comment on some information that was found on the internet. A CSE advocate has placed a survey on a Facebook page concerning sex education courses in Vigo County. It is thought that the information gained from this questionnaire may be presented to you. I want to make sure that you are aware of the many problems that are inherent in such information. Whenever I teach statistics at Rose, my first test will have a question about something like this situation. Every beginning statistics student is expected to know that self-selected surveys like this are problematic on many levels. The first is that the general public doesn't seek out such a survey to complete it. Rather, this will have a biased sample of those people invited to take it, or of those in the social group of the person who formed the survey. To the credit of the person who created this questionnaire, the document starts with the word anecdotal. We often say that the plural of anecdote is not data. To this person's discredit, the phrase continues as anecdotal research. To really call this research, the person would need to seek out a randomly chosen sample of those who had participated in the Vigo County School Corporation sex education classes. The survey has a second technical problem. The person has not written the program so that people may only answer once. With this particular questionnaire, it is possible for one person to fill out the information multiple times, even theoretically thousands of times. In some surveying software, it is possible to ensure that people don't answer more than once. We do this at Rose all the time. If someone has answered a survey more than once, it may introduce a bias. Further, in this case, it is possible for people to answer dishonestly, saying that they belong in the target group for the survey when they don't really. In fact, there's a Facebook post that shows a friend of the original creator encouraging people to fill out the survey when they are parents of those in the focus group, rather than actually in the group, or to fill it out even if they have just looked at the curriculum. This, of course, makes many of the questions meaningless. How can a parent or someone from another state with no connection to Vigo County schools speak for a Vigo County student on whether or not the student's perception is that their parents are well informed on sex and or willing to talk about sex? The use of non-target group answers in this information presented invalidates all of the collection of the data. This one act is enough to render most of the survey results absolutely meaningless. The really unfortunate thing in all of this is that Crisis Pregnancy Center does pre-test and post-test with each class. CPC knows its results have validity because students who are actually about to sit in the class are given the pre-test, and then students who have gone through the class are given the post-test. Principal packets containing the information obtained from these tests are made for every school. CPC has also indicated a willingness to share this data with anyone who desires. The CSE advocate could have saved a great deal of effort on the part of many people by just asking for those results. But I think there's something more to all of this. We often say that one ought to use statistics like a sober person uses a lamppost. While someone sober uses a lamppost for illumination, someone who is drunk uses it for support. Many will have their minds made up before writing a questionnaire, which will lead to unconscious bias in the way questions are asked. Even the order of responses produces bias, as there are research papers showing that the first response is chosen much more frequently than its actual proportion. Again, polling programs will randomly order answers in order to help eliminate this bias. In most statistical reports, when someone gives the results, the great innumeracy of most people leads to a fear of any numerical statement. Thus, people are often intimidated into accepting something that is not necessarily true because they are afraid to ask questions or to admit their lack of understanding. It's the exact reason why I tell my students not to believe a word I say all quarter long. If they just take what I say on faith, they don't understand the topic. Here it is critically important for everyone involved to truly understand what is going on and to not make suppositions based upon bias. In this whole situation, I fear someone here is hoping to use the information they have garnered like a drunk at a lamppost. I hope I am incorrect. However, with all the problems with this survey, it seems clear to me that anyone trying to pass off the information in this document as valid statistical information is either ignorant of statistical reasoning or intellectually dishonest. I most sincerely hope it's the former, and I'd be glad to work with that person or better yet, with your board on doing something with statistical validity. The reasons for rejection of this information in the study are numerous. For the sake of the children, parents, and teachers of Vigo County, I encourage you to set aside whatever biases you start with and have your deliberations come with an open mind. You must reject what is invalid and only keep what is true. Thanks for your time.
I'll say this, I was curious as to what a math professor was going to bring to this, and I'm pleasantly surprised. So. But my degree is in mathematics as well, so thank you.
Next, we have Rebecca Losi. Rebecca is the CPR coordinator for Crisis Pregnancy Center.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Hayworth. Thank you for allowing me to speak to this issue. My name is Rebecca Losi. I'm the CPR coordinator for the Crisis Pregnancy Center and soon to be CPR instructor as well. I would call the board's attention to several items I have for you tonight. Those stacks are student surveys just from this year, keeping in mind we didn't get to all the schools before COVID. These are your students' own thoughts after having a week of CPR. You'll note they're overwhelmingly positive. We simply don't have time to read all of them, but I have loaded them all on a thumb drive for you to look through. And I ask you to please consider them as they're in your students' own words. You also have a copy of the National Sex Education Guidelines backed by CCUS and CSE advocates. I've made a packet with copies of actual CSE content. There's a blank teacher instructor form, various references, including the charts and research reports and surveys and data that I'll be using tonight, and they're in the order in which I'll refer to it. So I'm the new CPR coordinator. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology with a concentration in community health. I'm also the center's EPT coordinator, which is a class for pregnant couples and single moms. I will help analyze this through my sociological and community health lenses, as well as help you understand the benefits of CPR and instructors. Primary prevention is a strategy used in public health to inform the population by using educational efforts to inform individuals of the healthiest, most risk-free choice before they engage in risky behavior. And then, if some participate in risky behavior, to encourage them back to a risk-free status. CPR is a primary prevention and sexual risk avoidance program. Risk avoidance messages are the norm for how health communications are presented to individuals. Risk avoidance works. That's why we use it as the first line of defense in many public health campaigns like smoking cessation, because we know no amount of secondary smoke is safe or risk-free for children or individuals. In contrast, CSE programs use a sexual risk reduction strategy, which is a public health strategy designed for a narrower population. And I've included the chart there for you so you can see the reference there. These are people already engaged in risky behavior. So an example of this might be a needle exchange program for IV drug users, those already engaged in the risk. This risk reduction method in sex education not only reaches a narrower audience, but is built on the false assumption that the majority of teens are engaging in risky behavior. Directly from the Youth Behavior Survey, and I've included that copy for you as well, by the CDC, the most recent 2017 results for high schoolers in grades 9 to 12 are as follows. 39.5% of teens ever had sex, and 28.7% were currently sexually active, as defined in the last 3 months. That means 70% were not engaged in risky behavior. That's far from everyone's doing it. CSE programs work on ways to reduce the risk to teens rather than encourage students to eliminate them for the highest level of health and protection. This has the negative effect of normalizing teen sex as an expected behavior. This is where social norms theory comes into play. This theory explains much of people's behavior is influenced by their perception of how other members of their social group behave. So teens look to their peers to decide whether or not sexual activity will be considered the norm in their own minds. Remember, even your Casey speaker reiterated this when he said he asked the students to guess the number of peers who use alcohol or drugs, and they said close to 80%. We as people tend to over-exaggerate negative health behaviors and under-exaggerate positive ones. But theory helps to explain why CSE advocates would want this. Because if they overestimate the number of people engaged in risky behavior and just build a program off that incorrect estimate, then they can actually influence teen perceptions, because perceptions of norms can be more powerful influences on behavior than actual norms. And that is why it's of paramount importance to educate the public on the actual numbers and reinforce what the majority is already doing, positive and protective health behaviors. In my research, and I've included the full report for you in your handouts, Weed and Erickson offer a compelling report examining some CSE programs and impacts. They examined what constituted popular CSE curricula to be called evidence-based. They examined 5 key criteria, things like whether the studies provided the protective benefits they claimed, like reducing teen pregnancy, increasing condom use, decreasing STIs, and whether the studies could be replicated by independent researchers, very important in order to corroborate scientific validity. They found none of the 18 popular school-based programs showed effectiveness at reducing teen pregnancy. None of the programs demonstrated a reduction in teen STDs. Now, no public health campaign ever wants to produce the opposite intended effect. In fact, it's better to have no or null effect. Their research found 6 out of 40, or 15%, of CSE programs produced 10 significant negative effects, including increased rates of sexual initiation, frequent sex, recent sex, oral sex, pregnancy, and reduced contraceptive or condom use. 4 of these programs are popular school-based CSE programs on the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services list of evidence-based programs. Concerningly, Weed and Erickson found failure rates for sustained effects on protective outcomes, pregnancies, condom use, and lower STIs. Failure rates ranged from 76 to 100%, with an overall failure rate of 85%. So as you can see, evidence-based and federally funded do not inspire the confidence that they should, that a public health program has proven safe and effective. CPR is reviewed for accuracy every year. Out of the 180 days your students spend in instruction, we account for 5. That's about 2%. We hold parent meetings, we're transparent. However, after digging to find actual content from CSE programs, here is an example from Making Proud Choices, a comprehensive education program currently taught in Indiana, because you need to know all the aspects of what you're considering here. You will have copies of this as well, so you can see the page numbers, but I'll give it to you as well. This lesson is an activity taught to children 12 to 14. Remember, the age of consent is 16 in Indiana. To try to negotiate condom use. On page 150, it says you can use condoms as a method of foreplay. You can think up a sexual fantasy using condoms. You can act sexy, sensual when putting condoms on, and you can tease each other sexually, and on and on. Also in the same program, on page 148, it has the children brainstorming about what to do if a male loses his erection after putting on a condom, and the children are to come up with the solutions like continue playing and stimulating one another, relax, and enjoy the fun. Keep in mind 2 things. This is a federally funded program, and this is evidence-based. There is another program entitled You, Your Life, and Your Dreams, and on page 104, it tells children as young as 10 and references sex toys or sex aids and says these devices are made to enhance sexual pleasure. You can use a sex toy by yourself or as a couple. And this is considered safe, age-appropriate content for children as young as 10. This content makes early sexualization of children their primary goal. Comprehensive sex ed approaches use this to push a social agenda above medically accurate, age-appropriate, and more effective public health programs. Here are just a few examples, and I've included the article summarizing lots of abstinence-based programs. Here's a few. In a 2010 study published by the American Medical Association, it concludes that an abstinence-only intervention reduced sexual initiation as well as recent sexual activity among a group of African American adolescents. Another abstinence-based program entitled Best Friends found girls were nearly 6.5 times more likely to abstain from sexual activity than youth risk behavior survey respondents. In Monroe County, New York, the Not Me, Not Now program found sexual activity rates of 15-year-olds across the county dropped from 46 to 31%, and the pregnancy rate for girls ages 15 through 17 in Monroe County fell from 63.4 pregnancies to 49.5 pregnancies per 1,000. Teen aid and sex respect program participants were 1/3 less likely to engage in sexual activity 1 year after the programs compared with non-participants. So what we have found with abstinence programs is that they produce better results, and while a few produce null or no effect, none of them produce a negative outcome like increased sexual initiation or pregnancy. Through Vigo County's diverse sex ed curriculum and guest programs like the CPR, you will effectively demonstrate that you prioritize encouraging students to the highest level of health and also inspire confidence for the parents of those students. The CPC employs physicians, nurses, ultrasound technologists, and other professionals, many of which have their degrees in social sciences. We provide educational classes, resources, pregnancy testing, ultrasounds, female exams, STI screening, treatment, and counseling. This center is directly involved in primary and secondary public health interventions. Our faith-based status hinders us from providing these services about as much as St. Vincent's Hospital in Indy's faith-based status does. No one calls them that Christian hospital, St. Vincent's, or implies that they cannot provide medically accurate professional services due to their faith-based status. But I'll reiterate here, the CPC does not own or write the CPR curriculum. There are no religious references. We respect public schools as exempt from religious materials. Also, the claim that the school should find others who happen to be licensed teachers to deliver CPR not only goes against your board's own recommendation, but makes no sense because your health and science teachers already fulfill that role in the classroom. The board's recommendation regarding community resources persons, and I've included a copy for you as well, states, the Vigo County Board of School Trustees recognizes that one of the greatest resources of the school district is to be found in the citizens of the community who have special knowledge and particular talents to contribute to the school program. The board therefore encourages the use of community resources and citizens to assist in furthering the educational program. Your teachers are encouraged to seek out community members with other experiences to enhance the classroom. Our training for CPR certification in Indy makes us certified to teach CPR, but our employment in a clinic that provides educational and medical services regarding sexual health and pregnancy makes us even more appropriate to be the ones trained in this content to deliver it to the classroom. Current CPR instructor Adam holds a degree in engineering, is a youth pastor, which uniquely qualifies him with special talents on how to engage with youth. He is certified in CPR content and screens and counsels male STI clients. I am becoming certified in CPR content in August. I'm sitting for the Sexual Risk Avoidance Specialist certification in 2 weeks, just to add to my credentials and challenge myself. And I teach and mentor pregnant moms through the EPT and Earn While You Learn programs at the CPC. Our qualifications should inspire every confidence that not only do we have that special knowledge and particular talent, but also that we are completely committed to furthering the health and well-being of your students. Also, the CPR program is free to schools, as the CPC covers the cost. We absorb the cost of student materials, instructor manuals, demonstration materials, training and recertification of instructors through 100% community funds. This is how much our community believes in our program, that we have an entire budget, totally funded by them, set aside to cover these costs so we can bring the program to the school free of charge. If Vigo County Schools took over the program, they would be responsible for those additional costs. And in a budget crisis like Vigo County is having, this doesn't seem prudent or even possible. And we are happy to provide this program for free to Vigo County and have done so for a number of years. In closing, I'll share what I've learned from talking with past and present instructors. Each instructor reiterated, teachers love us coming in because they're able to sit back and observe their students in a different way and possibly learn things about them they wouldn't otherwise know. Our instructors further support the teachers by walking in with no preconceived notions about the students. They just engage with everyone equally. CPR instructors affirm the worth of every student. I heard it for myself by observing in the classroom before COVID. I believe the board would be impressed by how well the instructors knew the content, how much the students enjoyed having a guest speaker, and how well the instructors engaged with your students in the classroom. Please let us continue to encourage your students to the highest level of health and wellness. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Karen Mitchell. Karen is CPR Program Director and Sexual Risk Avoidance Specialist.
Good morning, or good evening. Thank you, Dr. Hayworth, President Irwin, members of the school board and community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about the Creating Positive Relationships curriculum. My name is Karen Mitchell. I'm the Program Director for Creating Positive Relationships. I began as a CPR instructor 15 years ago, and I've been the Program Director for 11 years. CPR is a relationship education course that has been taught over the last 30 years throughout the U.S. and in 10 different countries all over the world. We have curriculum for middle school, high school, and adults. It's well received in different cultures and with participants who have varying levels of sexual experience. The lessons are for everyone, no matter one's sexual orientation. We feel the focus should be on building the relationship, and any relationship where the focus is on sex can be unbalanced. Nonprofit organizations contract with Creating Positive Relationships and form our associate program. The CPC of Wabash Valley is one such associate. Two other examples are the Tipton County Health Department and Franciscan Health in Michigan City. Every CPR instructor is trained and certified to maintain the fidelity of the program. Each of our lessons takes a holistic approach, lining up with what your health teachers described in teaching about whole person health. The Department of Health and Human Services designed an optimal health model as a way to make positive health practices the easiest choice. It is adaptable to a range of risk behaviors and measures success by the degree of movement away from risk. You'll find it inside your folder on the right-hand side. The optimal health model is a target with 3 circles, green in the middle, then yellow, then red. You see the arrow that describes that it measures success by the degree of movement away from risk. While I've heard arguments against teaching abstinence to young people, this model illustrates the goal of health education. CPR's emphasis on sexual risk avoidance lines up with this model. The closer the teaching is to the target of no risk, the better for students. Education should set the bar high. CPR instruction supports the premise that abstinence or cessation from sexual activity outside of marriage is the healthiest standard. Each student learns how to set boundaries in a relationship and how to communicate those boundaries to others. We teach about the future. Many teens believe once they have sex, they can no longer choose abstinence. The truth is, they can choose abstinence anytime. The high school CPR curriculum has been valuable to a teen moms group in Indianapolis, as well as single adult homeless moms living in group housing. Relationship education helps these moms prepare for healthy futures as they learn how to reset boundaries and communicate those boundaries to anyone they like romantically. These lessons are equally valuable to middle school and high school students. Sexual activity is best within the context of a healthy relationship. A high level of physical touch before a relationship begins can lead to hurtful consequences. CPR differentiates between a mutual relationship and abuse. When someone is sexually abused, that does not take away from their decision for abstinence. Abstinence is a choice, abuse is not. The curriculum addresses sexual abuse in age-appropriate ways, and all instructors are trained on how to help any student who comes forward with indicators of abuse. Indiana issued a new state law 2 years ago requiring students to learn about sexual abuse. CPR recognizes the importance of this and has always included that valuable information in our curriculum, and the State Department of Education has informed us that our content meets that requirement for schools. CPR lessons are taught in school from 6th grade through high school. High school is 1 week in health class, which most Indiana schools cover during freshman or sophomore years. In the state of Indiana, the legal age of consent is 16 years old. Students receiving these lessons in Vigo County are not legally allowed to have sex. Once old enough, society will tell them that they only need to get consent for sex. We have a responsibility to teach there is more. Consent can be coerced, and it requires a voice to speak up. When a relationship is developed over time, before sexual activity begins, it can be safer than just an agreement to have sex. In CPR, every grade level is taught about setting boundaries. When 2 people like each other romantically, it's natural that they'll want to show physical affection. We use stair steps to illustrate the different levels of expressing romantic physical affection. Each level involves more physical touch than the previous. We call this the steps of affection. It ranges from holding hands as the first step to intercourse on the top step. Students decide where to set the line or boundary, and then are taught how to communicate that boundary with someone they like romantically. There are student booklets inside of your folder, and you can see the steps of affection in each of those grade levels. In the 6th grade, it is not filled out, the students fill it out, but all the other grades, it's already in there. There is more taught in each grade level than I have time to cover, but I can address some of the content. Each participant receives a student booklet to be shared with parents each evening. We hope this helps the parents in their homes start and continue conversations. 6th grade lessons focus on maturity. CPR lessons explain how hormones released during puberty can create stronger emotions and affect behavior. Pornography is defined, and students learn that it has no educational benefit. We explain the difference between verbal and nonverbal communication with an example on how easy text communication can lead to misunderstanding and why healthy relationships require face-to-face communication. 7th grade lessons focus on peer influence. The need to fit in is highest at this age, and the ability to stand up against pressure is at its lowest. To avoid risk, we have the students consider different scenarios and decide if there's a risk for sexual activity. For example, watching TV with someone they like romantically while in the bedroom. If something intimate could happen, then there's a risk. If they go bowling with friends, there's not a risk for sexual behavior. If they're choosing abstinence, they can work toward avoiding situations that require a voice to stand up against pressure. We teach in this level how STIs are spread and the different ways they can affect the body, specifically HPV, genital herpes, and chlamydia. We have a lesson on sexting, sextortion, and pornography, and we end with a lesson on body image, and each student is given a link to share the video with parents and continue the conversation at home. 8th grade lessons are based off the Search Institute developmental assets. These assets are listed in the 8th grade student booklet on pages 6 through 9 of that level 3 booklet. According to the research at Search Institute, the more of these developmental assets a student has, the less likely they are to get involved in risky behavior. We pose a question to students. If you were given a book with blank pages, and you knew that whatever you wrote from now until the end would come true, what would you write? Their life is a blank page. How it will unfold is yet to be discovered. The 8th grade lessons cover knowing the developmental assets that can help them be successful, choosing friends well, knowing consequences to sexual decisions, relying on parents, guardians, and other adult mentors, and knowing what talents, abilities to work towards over the next few years. They have more control over their future than they realize. These lessons focus on what to do more than what not to do, and point the student closer to that inner target on the optimal health model. Our high school and adult curriculum address 5 characteristics of a healthy relationship: compatibility, chemistry, character, communication, and commitment. We ask students to consider what they want in a long-lasting relationship like marriage. They determine the qualities and characteristics that are important to them and write them out on a chart. This chart gives them guidance in choosing who would be good to date. We created a character icon clock to illustrate the importance of taking the time to be intentional to know someone's character. It's on the center of the high school booklet. The image includes 5 areas of importance: values, beliefs, and actions, family, friends, past relationships, and settings like school, work, and leisure. When considering how long it takes to know someone well enough to make a lifelong commitment like marriage, the answer is however long it takes to be together in each of these areas multiple times. If they're going to college in separate states and rarely see each other, it can take years. If they live nearby and see each other more often, it will take at least a few months. This is a helpful tool for an adult when considering if they're done looking and ready to commit. We provide detailed information on specific STIs at the high school level and explain what about the symptoms and how they look on the skin, the effectiveness of different contraception, and the only form of contraception that might help against catching certain STIs. We also teach more detailed information on healthy versus unhealthy relationships, including red flags and warning signs. The student booklet includes many websites for further information on healthy and unhealthy relationships. Finally, students consider extreme ways of arguing, like cat and dog fighting, and bury it and forget it. Then we discuss a middle ground that is more beneficial, and they're given examples of how to put this skill into practice. Many students have said this lesson has helped them learn to be more assertive when communicating with friends and family about their needs, and has helped them learn how to express themselves when they're angry without ruining relationships. Practicing this skill now can help them continue this way of open communication in marriage and other lifelong relationships. There's more to relationship education that can be taught in 5 lessons. That's why students are given booklets to share with others. Our hope is they will share the booklet with a parent who continues the conversation, or share the booklet with a date to start conversations about the boundaries they want. And many students have told us they've done that. Relationships can be complicated, and kids are young and not always able to determine what is healthy versus unhealthy. Waiting is the healthiest option. Some will, some won't. For those who don't wait and face a pregnancy, helpful organizations like the CPC will help them with parenting classes, supplies, and information on future relationships. CPC is the best organization to teach in the schools. They are present before decisions are made, and they exist to be present after decisions are made. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about the value creating positive relationships provides to your students.
Thank you. We have another hour to go. I would respectfully ask, if you're up moving around, that you please wear your masks as we go to the bathroom. Just a reminder that this next opportunity is for the public, and I do know that there are several people that have reached out and signed up beforehand. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and I'll try to give you the 30-second warning, I guess, of where that's coming. So thank you very much.
I believe that Tim Ramsier is first up.
President Aaron, Dr. Hayworth, members of the committee, my name is Tim Ramsier. I am the Executive Director of Youth for Christ of the Wabash Valley. I have served in that capacity for the past 20 years, and I have over 30 years of experience in working with middle school and high school aged youth. I have a BA from the University of Wisconsin, a Master's of Divinity from Trinity Seminary in Chicago, and I'm currently working on my doctorate from Gordon Conwell Seminary just outside of Boston. I'm here to voice my support for the Creating Positive Relationships program that is currently in place in the Vigo County schools. I cannot emphasize enough how deeply I support this program. Last week you heard the unwavering support from administrators and teachers from this corporation regarding the CPR program, and without exception, they came to this podium to speak in defense of the collaborative work that's being done. I personally have worked alongside many of the CPR instructors, and I feel they do an exemplary job in providing the students with a comprehensive presentation of accurate material that is grounded in solid science without any bias whatsoever. Let me repeat that last remark. Without any bias whatsoever. A great deal of misinformation and unproven opinion has been voiced by some individuals over the past several months. This concerns me. The purpose of this committee is to vet the overall sex education program material, but it is particularly focused on CPR program as evidenced by the many remarks that have been made even before tonight. I am aware that this committee is tasked with making a recommendation to the school board as a whole by the end of this month, if not sooner. But I am concerned about that recommendation when those who are opposed to the CPR program are themselves not providing material, curriculum, budgets, or strategies of staffing to be vetted. No other group that is in partnership with the school corporation has experienced the level of scrutiny or the degree of disinformation that CPR has. As a matter of fact, many of the other groups that have voiced support for the relationship that exists now. CPR's long-standing track record of collaborative work that spans over 2 decades with the school corporation speaks for itself. They are in compliance with the Indiana Code that requires 3 specific particulars that must be presented. To teach abstinence from sexual activity outside of marriage is to be the expected standard. To teach that abstinence from sexual activity is the only way to avoid unwanted pregnancy and STDs. And to teach the best way to avoid STDs and other associated health problems is to establish a mutually faithful, monogamous marriage relationship.
30 seconds.
CPR, as do the other groups such as CODA, Chances for Youth, Purdue Extension Team, Mercy, Union Hospital, and Regional Hospital, have proven themselves to be, as the words of a teacher last week, the best of the best. Any other viewpoint about CPR's credentials, academics, and effectiveness is anecdotal at best. It is my hope that this committee considers the remarks and information presented it tonight and other times with the utmost wisdom and care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Joe Gormand and Rachel Gormand.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Gormong, and I'm going to be a sophomore this year. I've taken the CPR course 4 times, and I'll admit that at first I wasn't too excited about taking it. I was worried about everything being awkward and gross. But after just one day, I realized it was the complete opposite of my expectations. The program was fun, it was educational, it was impactful. Probably my favorite part was the demonstrations. If there's anything I still remember, it's that. One that sticks clearly in my mind is an image of stairs, which was previously mentioned. There were levels of physical contact. First was hand-holding, then hugging, the underwear zone, and then sexual intercourse. The lesson was that you can choose where to draw the line in your relationship. That's probably what was most impactful to me. The program was empowering. The biggest thing I took away was that we as students have the power to say no to not only sex, but drugs, alcohol, and anything we aren't comfortable with that others may pressure us to do. When it's easy to want to follow the crowd, the CPR program teaches that you don't have to. They also made it very clear that it's never too late. They didn't distribute shame on anyone who had done drugs, alcohol, or had sex. Rather, they pushed that you can always start over at any time. The big topic was abstinence, and with that they talked about how for those that had engaged in sexual intercourse and wanted to start over after realizing the risks, you can always restart. It was called secondary abstinence. They didn't make any less of that. The instructors weren't there to shame us or to shove any information down our throats. They were there to offer insight and advice to keep us safe. It's obvious that they want the best for the students they teach. After the program, I always felt confident, enabled, and I felt heard and cared for. There's not any program like this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been a volunteer for the CPC and the CPR program for over 12 years. I have a middle school daughter, and you just heard from my high school daughter, and they both have been a part of the CPR program. My wife and I are very open with our children about sex. Being a school bus driver, I hear lots of terms on the bus that are just derogatory and inappropriate, and on more than one occasion my daughters have come home and asked questions, "Dad, what does this mean?" And we're very open with them, and we remind them that there is never a dumb question, and we'd rather they know proper terms than derogatory terms. After my girls had attended the CPR program in the local schools, it opened up doors in ways I never dreamed. One of those, I spent probably 30 minutes at bedtime with my middle school daughter, and she opened up about her, the classes and things about sex, and so I'm very thankful for that. I'm very thankful for the CPR program and what it teaches, and I'm very thankful for each one of you that are here tonight, and I know that the decision that you make will not be popular with everyone, but I urge you to challenge yourself and look deep into the program and see what you think and feel is most beneficial, not just for your students, but also my daughters and their students and their daughters. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Colin, just for a point of clarification, if you'll let me know when they're teaming up, that way I know. I didn't know, I think you were trying to stay within the 3. I appreciate that greatly, but I think that allows people to know what we're trying to do here. By no means, I mean, if you'd wanted the full 3 as individuals, you could have had the full 3.
Okay, Next, we have Claire Thrift and Angie Thrift, mother and daughter. And so
Thank you.
they're coming up together.
Hi, my name is Claire Thrift, and I am reading this letter on behalf of my father who could not be here, Paul Thrift. My name is Paul Thrift. I am sorry that I could not be here in person. I appreciate you allowing me to be heard and express my opinion as you make this important and impactful decision. I first became aware of the Creating Positive Relationship CPR program when my first child was entering Honey Creek Middle School. I made it my business to understand the content of this program before my child went through it. I attended the parents' meeting offered by the CPR and did my own research on its content. I determined the material being presented by the CPR instructors is age-appropriate, honest, and informative. The program is completely professional and extremely well organized and well presented. The program helped introduce my kids to the subject of sex in a setting with their peers. It also presented them that they have choices, that choices have consequences, and that each of us individually have self-worth and should not be bullied or pressured into situations they are not comfortable with, along with many other sound principles. When I learned that there was pressure from a vocal minority to incorporate a so-called comprehensive sex education program, CSE, into the Vigo County school system, I once again made it my business to research and understand what was being proposed. Upon reviewing the material currently included in many CSE programs, I found it extremely inappropriate and shocking that this would be shown to high school, even middle school age children, and many times younger. As I did my research, I viewed material that as an adult I would be embarrassed to view in mixed company, much less have it presented to my children in a classroom setting. The curriculum in many CSE programs is more tantalizing and shocking than informative, and presents a clear and present danger to our children. If you are considering this, I would plead with you to watch and read the curriculum routinely included in the CSE programs. It appears to me that a vocal minority have an agenda to expose our children to concepts and to desensitize them to many things that an age is totally inappropriate. I would ask these proponents, what is the limit of the amount of graphic content we show to children? What is the limit for a 3rd grader? What is the limit for a 6th grader, a 10th grader? It appears CSE's approach is absolutely no limit. Anything, anytime, anywhere, to any age. Even more, it seems to me the agenda is to force total compliance, acceptance and embracing of concepts that to most of us are offensive and inappropriate to present to our precious children. If our school system adopts a CSE program, I would not allow my child to attend it under any circumstances. Furthermore, I will strongly consider whether I allow my children to attend a school system that allows it. I so appreciate your thoughtful consideration of this important issue and for allowing me to provide my thoughts. I would also like to share some of my thoughts from my perspective. I just graduated from North this year, so it was, but it is a great program, and I hope that you guys consider keeping it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, Heather Sherman.
Good evening. My name is Heather Sherman. I am the mother of 3 children who are currently enrolled in the Vigo County School Corporation. As a mother, I have done research on the core curriculum guidelines that were set at a national level by SECUS, or the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, for all CSE curriculum. In doing that research, I have found many areas of concern. According to the guidelines that I found on secus.org website, and anyone else can look at them as well, there are 4 levels of development that begin, according to them, at the age of 5 and continue to the age of 18. Here are a few of the guidelines that relate to the developmental stages of my own children. Level 1, Most children are curious about their bodies, and bodies can feel good when they're touched. Level 1, touching and rubbing one's self, is called masturbation. Level 3, masturbation, either alone or with a partner, is one way that people can enjoy and express their sexuality without risking pregnancy or an STD. Level 4, some people use erotic photographs, movies, art, literature, or the internet to enhance their sexual fantasies when they are alone or with a partner. I had also planned to include excerpts from 2 CSE curriculums that I found after researching, but the samples were so graphic that we decided to edit them out so they could not be heard by children that will be present tonight. I will have unedited copies that I will email to the entire school board this evening when I get home. Modern sex ed began in the 60s. It was based on the Kinsey Institute founder and the Indiana University professor Alfred Kinsey's model of human sexuality. For Professor Kinsey, it was anything goes when it comes to sexuality, as found in his book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. He believed that pedophiles were misunderstood and that their punishments were unjust, because, quoted by him, sexuality is not an appetite to be curbed. It was in this context in 1964 that Dr. Mary Caldron, the former medical director of the Planned Parenthood, founded the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. Dr. Caldron and Waldro Pomeroy, a disciple of Kinsey who served as the president of SICUS, publicly argued, "It is time to admit that incest need not be a perversion or a symptom of mental illness." While the founders of SICUS and SCE Sexual Education are long gone, their vision is alive and well. The obligation to fight it rests on the shoulders of every responsible adult, and that includes each of you. I stand in direct opposition of removing CPR, and I ask you to vote no on CSE.
Jeff Harple.
Thank you, school board, for your work, and we're grateful for your time. As you're aware, all changes have their respective pros and cons. Everything can be debated. However, this particular subject has garnered the attention and outrage of hundreds of parents, families, and teachers. I am certain that if this change occurs, or variations of it, the conflict will extend far beyond these meetings. I rise in opposition to changes from CPR to comprehensive sex ed. I stand in favor of keeping our current and proven program, creating positive relationships, in its complete form without revisions. I wish to focus on a few other issues that currently reside in our community. It's no secret that our community is facing financial constraints. Many of our school facilities need to be upgraded. The cost has been estimated in the millions of dollars. Teachers are now dependent on fundraising to supply the many extra in-classroom needs. With these financial constraints already in existence, a new curriculum means new money's being spent, training teachers, and the continued education and material. With a proven curriculum already in place, this change is an expense we cannot afford. Being under the constant financial strain, we are only hindering ourselves by proposing yet another program, eroding the much-needed funds which are already depleted. Next, it should be noted that when students enroll in our public schools, there is a financial gain to the school district. I'm asking you to examine the ramifications of a change in attendance. If passed, this most controversial curriculum, or variations of it, will certainly detract from our community. If CPR is removed and comprehensive sex ed is implemented, it may be the final straw for many parents, pushing them to find other educational pathways. The parents who have seen this material believe that this comprehensive sex ed takes precedent over them. Curiously, the details of comprehensive sexuality education has not been shared with our community at large. There is a concern that when people find out what this new curriculum entails, they will remove their students, thus leaving our entire school district with less students and less needed funds. Any version of it might also be a detraction for incoming families considering the benefits of our area. Let's be a level above. Finally, comprehensive sexuality teaching is not an improvement. Its teaching is a risk all by itself. If a change occurs, it may be the catalyst forcing an exodus of more students, thus leaving our school district weaker and more fragmented than ever before. I urge you to consider the many voices who believe that CPR is an appropriate curriculum and that helps the great majority of students. Consider the roles of parents at the same time and keep our students enrolled. I thank you for your consideration.
Richard Leeson.
Superintendent Dr. Hayworth and the school board, I thank you today for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you. I am the mother of 4 teenage boys. After years of staying home with them, I went through the Creating Positive Relations instruction training in Indianapolis in order to become an instructor. I ended by deciding to resume full-time teaching instead and needed to renew my teaching license. I submitted the CPR coursework to the state of Indiana, and my license was renewed based solely on that training. The training is extensive, and then it covers over 150 state standards that meet educational criteria for our schools. If the coursework is good enough to meet the State Board of Education license renewal requirements, I don't see how any question can remain as the qualifications of the CPR instructors. Teachers, physicians, counselors, social workers, and many other professionals go through the CPR training in Indianapolis. Some of the doctors use the training for medical relief work in Africa for AIDS and STD prevention. Some professionals repeat the CPR coursework every few years because of the belief that it adds value to their field of work. I now teach 6th grade science at Woodrow Wilson. I use my CPR training daily as I help middle school students navigate tough life choices. I believe I am a better teacher because of this CPR coursework. Licensed teachers are always present in the classroom when CPR curriculum is taught. This is true for all the outside speakers and instructors brought in to teach our students. The CPR program and instructors have a very positive reputation in our schools among teachers, staff, and students. After hearing Holly Pease and her presentation at the school board work session last week, it is evident that we have a well-coordinated community of professionals using a diverse, evidence-based, medically accurate information to enhance the sex education program in VCSC while covering the many Indiana state standards for health and wellness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie Shue.
Hello, members of the board and Superintendent Hayworth. Today I would like to talk a little bit about my experience as well as a student that I got really close with the last few years who graduated 2 years ago on his experience with the CPR program. So this letter is from a young gentleman named Nathan Bonnet. He said, I attended Vigo County School from kindergarten through high school, and I just graduated my first year at ISU. I started learning from the CPR program in middle school, which seemed like a good time for that information. We learned about puberty mostly. My parents had already told me pretty much everything, but it's still kind of uncomfortable to me. I do apologize for the shaking. I'm usually good at public speaking, but
Quite all right.
in high school we learned more about our bodies and how they work, We were warned about STDs and how the #1 way to avoid them is abstinence. That made a lot of sense. Condoms aren't 100% reliable, and pregnancy is almost guaranteed with sex. There's so much more to a relationship than sex. The CPR program covered a lot of that. It taught us about healthy relationships. I remember hearing about the ladder of dating and physical affection. It was all based on your own choice on how far you were comfortable going. No one shamed us or tried to push any views on us. It seemed like they just wanted us to think about all these things before we got into a situation where we had to decide quickly. These lessons, in addition to what my parents taught, have helped me make my decisions in my dating relationship. I think the CPR program is a valuable program and should be continued. Sincerely, Nathan Bonnet. Like Nathan, I too had a positive viewpoint when it came to the CPR program. I graduated in 2014, and I remember going, especially in middle school, to the CPR programs. And my most memorable thing was in 8th grade in Miss Steele's science class. There was a demonstration with tape, and so when you take a piece of tape and you put it on an object, and you rip it off, and then you put it back on, it's not the same. From my own experience and my own conviction, I'm happily married now, but I made the wrong decision in middle school and high school. And that's something that I've had to fight with myself, but fortunately, from what I've learned from the CPR program in high school, is that you are given another chance. There's another chance, and so I encourage you, with all the information given tonight, not even just bias, just the information given tonight. It's only the logical choice. Thank you.
Beth DeCosta.
Good evening. My name is Beth DeCosta. My children attended Vigo County schools. I'm a grandparent now, and I'm a Vigo County citizen who sincerely cares about having the highest and best standard of education for all the youth in our community. I've been following the recent sex education discussion since first seeing it spoken of in our local paper. I attended last Monday night's board meeting and heard our local health and science teachers speak. Each middle school and high school were represented. The health education coordinator was also present and led the order of presentation. She also summarized the content and the use of the current health textbooks. The textbooks bring a thorough course on human sexuality for the students. And I thank the board for inviting the teachers to speak and allowing us to hear from them directly about their use of the CPR program and the health curriculum from their perspective. They brought a helpful presentation. I want to thank them for the work they do and the oversight that they have in teaching our youth. I was so impressed with their sincerity, and I walked away with even more gratitude for them and what they do. I appreciate the response I received from Joni Wise to my April 27th email to the entire board. She assured me there was not a plan at all to replace CPR with a CSE curriculum. There was simply going to be a review of the program for medical accuracy and age appropriateness. I can say confidently now, the review has been given. The teachers, some with 20 or more years of experience in education, used these words to review the CPR program. The Crisis Pregnancy Center does an excellent job. CPR instructors do a phenomenal job. Massive benefit. Age appropriate. This was mentioned several times. Accurate. Learning made fun. Highly recommend. Looks forward to the CPR program for the students. Meets state law requirements. I see kids engaged that normally do not. Professional. Aligns with the state law. I want to see it continue. End quote. I heard no negative evaluation from any teacher. This is a strong and positive review of the CPR program and the positive message that it has for teens.
30 seconds.
To the board I say, your review is complete. I highly recommend that the board take the full review of the teachers. They have all worked alongside the CPR instructors. They have had multiple opportunities to evaluate. They all expressed overwhelming support for continued use of the CPR program, as do the large majority of parents. If this professional review from the teachers is not accepted by the board, I will have to believe you are being influenced by what I see is a national effort to try and remove any abstinence-based education. That would be wrong, and it would be in the direction opposite of our Indiana state law. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melinda Bonet.
Good evening. The last time I addressed the school board regarding the sex ed curriculum, I spoke as a concerned parent of 4 kids ages 9 to 19. Tonight I'd like to speak more from my professional background and experience. I have a master's of education with a major in school psychology. I've taught psychology and child development at the college level, and I used to be CASA director for Vigo County. I've also worked as a child and family counselor. Opponents of the Creating Positive Relationship program have stated that abstinence is an inappropriate or unrealistic goal for our children. They're going to have sex anyway, they say. And yes, some kids will, and some kids won't, but that's not the point. CPR does not tell students that sex is bad or that they should never do it. CPR lays the foundation for understanding that there's much more to a relationship than sex, and that when it occurs outside of a long-term commitment, there can be difficult consequences. This message is relevant to every student, regardless of their gender or sexual orientation. In the workplace, in education, and in child rearing, there are any number of examples to illustrate the value of setting the bar high. We don't ask our children to aim for a D in math. We don't encourage them to give their worst effort when they try out for sports or when they go to a job interview. And yet, I would argue that relationships, particularly those that involve sexuality, can impact a teen's life socially, emotionally, physically, in ways that grades, sports, and jobs rarely do. The research is clear that teen sex is risky behavior and associated with a long list of potential negative outcomes that often continue into adulthood. However, the longer their sexual debut is delayed, the greater the likelihood of protective benefits. Now, when our students don't make the grade or the cut, we still care about them, right? We don't reject them. We don't shame them. We encourage them to keep trying. This is the CPR response as well. I've studied the curriculum, both the middle school and the high school. They're clear that despite any previous experience, new choices can be made at any time. This class is simply not pass or fail. It is well established that people rise and fall to the level of our expectations. With sexuality, the highest expectation is the one that promotes physical and emotional wellness. It's the one with the least risk of STIs, pregnancy, and emotional pain. That is abstinence. CPR sets the bar high for sexual behavior while giving students the tools and encouragement they need in order to succeed. Our students don't deserve anything less. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Shannon Myers.
Hello, my name is Shannon Myers. I have a bachelor's in family and consumer science education. I'm a retired foster parent of 14 years and previously was a development therapist for an Indiana State program. I currently stay home with the youngest of my 6 children, ages 6 months to 17 years old, some of which attend Vigo County schools. I was able to observe the CPR curriculum in 6th through 8th grade family and consumer science classes. The program was very well rounded and complemented the VCSC curriculum and state standards. The CPR instructors were very professional, knew the content well, and had amazing connection with the students for only being in the classroom for a short time. The students seemed to respect the instructors, even the kids who often checked out during other subjects. I specifically remember wondering myself how they found these instructors that were so upbeat, positive, with a knack for interacting with the students. It was obvious they genuinely wanted the students to learn about sex education, positive choices, and living a well-rounded, healthy life. As many times I've heard, a good curriculum should be so well written that anyone could pick it up and know exactly what to teach. With an excellent curriculum and trained instructors, CPR is a win-win for everyone. I oppose the CSE curriculum for many reasons, but my largest concerns are in a number of counties where CSE curriculums have been implemented. For instance, in Chicago, San Diego, and Goshen, Indiana, parents are now fighting to get the curriculum removed after seeing the graphic lessons and undertones of encouraging sexual promiscuity, or as long as the students make proud choices by using condoms and contraceptives. Let me add, I'm not against contraceptives or sex education, but I will not encourage risky behavior in adolescents. I also do not agree with the overall curriculum that is written for kindergarten through 12th grade. While Vigo County may not be looking to add sex education for 5 to 8-year-olds at this time, you can go to the SICUS website and see the guidelines for the CSE K through 12 program, which includes levels 1 through 4. Level 1 is for children ages 5 through 8, and the program advocates children learn the following, and I quote, touching and rubbing one's own genitals to feel good is called masturbation. Under reproduction, vaginal intercourse, when a penis is placed inside a vagina, is the most common way for an egg and sperm to join. That is their recommendation for teaching 5 to 8-year-olds. Any curriculum that believes that it's a school responsibility to teach 5 to 8-year-olds those two concepts plus a host of other inappropriate content cannot be trusted to deliver age-appropriate curriculum for any age group. While I'm aware that VCSE isn't looking to teach these things to 8-year-olds right now, it will only be a matter of time before advocates for CSE fight to get their curriculum taught younger and younger. This is how the overall CSE curriculums work, or else they wouldn't have a full curriculum targeted to start in kindergarten. Please help us protect our children, keeping the Creative Positive Relationships program in our schools.
Lisa Brewster.
Thank you. Education Board, Dr. Hayworth. My name is Lisa Brewster, and I'm a parent of 5 children that have all attended or are attending Vigo County schools. I am a trained, certified instructor of the CPR program. To become certified, I traveled to CPR office in Indy for 20 hours of training on the curriculum program. I also received in-house training on the annually updated curriculum for the CPR coordinator, and instructors also have to recertify every 2 years. I taught the CPR program, or curriculum, in Vigo County, surrounding counties for the past 2 years. It is this very unique perspective in my experience with teaching CPR that I want to talk to you about this evening. In the past 2 years, at least 6 students have confided in a CPR instructor that they were being abused at home. 5 of them confided in me. They did not report this to their teacher, and they did not report this to another adult. However, in the very, very short time that we were in the classroom presenting this curriculum, we were able to build enough trust that the students of the CPR class feel comfortable telling us about the abuse they are dealing with in their home. I give this credit mostly to CPR curriculum and its message of safe, healthy relationships. It's focused on the value of each and every person. I do not know if this happens every day in every school, but I would certainly hope and pray that it does not. Fortunately, my training includes a scenario and I knew what to do. Also, remember that Vigo County licensed health or science teachers are always present while CPR is being taught. I believe that it is not only incorrect but unfair to say that CPR instructors are not experts in the content when most other groups that come to speak in the classroom or work in the community have the same or less training on the content in which they speak. Some examples are CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocate, that is, they defend child's rights in the legal juvenile court setting, 30 hours. Chances for Youth, 10 to 14 hours. American Red Cross, to become a cardiopulmonary resuscitation instructor, you must hold a CPR certification, 4 to 6 hours, to teach another 16 hours. Foster parenting, 20 hours. CODA requires no formal training, and again, all these groups tend to come in. There are varying opinions online as to what constitutes an expert. Some think it takes 10,000 hours of experience or training. Creating positive relationships is just a small extension of what the school is already covering as part of the sex ed program. Thank you.
Thank you. As we continue, we're going to take public comment for another 15 minutes. That clock is a little off, so we started at about 6:05, so we'll be looking at that clock back there at 6:05, so it would be 8:05 when we would cut off. So, but we can continue. Thank you.
Dominic DaCosta.
Good evening, school board and staff. My wife's already been up to the podium here, and she's kind of blown holes in everything I was going to say. But one of the things she didn't cover is that we've been in Beagle County, Terre Haute, since 1989. I came to work here at Tri-Industries, which is now GE Aviation. I was director of engineering there for a good long period of time. I'm now happily retired. We've put 2 children through school from elementary all the way through college right here in Terre Haute. And now they're parents and we're grandparents. One of the things that I really enjoyed from the last meeting were all the teachers that came forward and paid just enormous compliments to their peers in the CPR system that they, of course, participate in by sitting there and listening to the same curriculum that's being given to the students. And the fact that these are licensed teachers with 10, 15, 20 and plus years, and they said everything was delivered professionally, accurately, and that the students' interaction was amazing to them. I handed out to the board a little handout that you should have there, and basically I took stats, being an engineer work that way, I took stats from the Indiana State Vital Statistics, specifically Beagle County, 2016, 2017. And the coolest thing was that it looks like we don't have pregnancies between 10 years old and 14 in whites and blacks. This is the way Indiana posts. And better yet, if you look at the back page of the first page that I gave you, I'm going to read directly from the Gutenmacher org. It says there's been a decline in pregnancy rates of 58% through the years of 1995 and 2013. The reason I think that's so cool is my wife and I used to be involved in the CPR system during that period of time, and it went down 58%, birth rates down 43%, abortion rates down 42%. Another site, Power to Decide, reported the following: teen pregnancies and childbearing at the historic lows, and there have been impressive progress on both fronts in all 50 states. However, the teen birth rate in Indiana declined 64% between 1991 and 2018. 64%. That drop alone has saved our state educational system and other health systems $58 million. I think you really need to look at it, because not only will, what one of the speakers said is students being removed, you guys do get elected by us, and you need to remember that.
3 minutes.
Sanders.
Dr. Hayworth, board president and board trustees. My name is Joey Sanders. I'm a parent, and I support the Creating Positive Relationships curriculum. Those in favor of the comprehensive sexuality education program continue to argue that an abstinence-based program is not a realistic tool of preparation for our children when it comes to sex. However, the school's responsibility is not to prepare our children for sex, but rather to prepare students on the instruction of human sexuality and the prevention of sexually transmitted infections.
According to the Indiana Department of Education's website, the following are the health science requirements. Section 13, throughout instruction on human sexuality or sexually transmitted diseases, an accredited school shall, number 1, require a teacher to teach abstinence from sexual activity outside of marriage as the expected standard for all school-age children. Number 2, include in the instruction that abstinence from sexual activity is the only certain way to avoid out-of-wedlock pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, and other associated health problems. And number 3, include in the instruction that the best way to avoid sexually transmitted diseases and other associated health problems is to establish a mutual, faithful, monogamous relationship in the context of marriage. The CPR program professionally addresses the standards set by the Indiana Department of Education's requirement and does so by presenting facts. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, sexual abstinence is defined as refraining from all forms of sexual activity and genital contact, such as vaginal, oral, or anal sex. They state that abstinence is the only 100% effective way to protect against pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. Therefore, the CPR program is addressing abstinence, and why is the program causing such controversy? It is the opinion of some of those opposing the CPR program that the current curriculum does not fully address the needs of the LGBTQIA+ community, and they are correct, it does not, but it does not have to. Out of the 14 subjects taught under the title of health science, discussing topics of the LGBTQIA+ community are not illegal, nor are they an educational requirement. To attack the CPR program and label it as ineffective when the program is effectively addressing the Indiana teaching requirements is unfair and misleading. The CPR program does exactly as the Indiana Department of Education asks. So what's the problem? The problem is clear. LGBTQIA issues are not fully being addressed to the liking of some groups. Let's not confuse the legal requirement to teach our children safe sex practices with the non-legal requirement of teaching topics related to gender identity and sexual orientation. Abstinence protects everyone, regardless of sexual orientation. If any part of the proposed CSC program addresses things outside of those covered under sections 2035-13, subsections 1 through 3, the school district has misaligned and navigated away from legal teaching requirements and has now entered into subjective themes that are outside of the purview of public schools. The Creating Positive Relationships program is effectively meeting the Indiana Department of Education's guidelines and therefore should continue to be made available as the abstinence-based program for the children in Vigo County. Thank you.
Jesse Ireland.
Good evening, Dr. Hayworth and school board members. My name is Jessie Ireland. I am now retired, but after proudly teaching 25 years in the Vigo County school system, I'm still very interested in the well-being of the students in Vigo County. I had the opportunity to visit the 8th grade classroom of Mrs. Carr at Honey Creek Middle School. The CPR instructor was Mrs. Lisa Brewster. I had not met either of these ladies prior to my visit, but my first impression was very favorable. Mrs. Brewster was prepared and knowledgeable of the lesson content, and Mrs. Carr was very complimentary of the instructor and the program. She remained in the classroom and was actively involved throughout the lesson. The first item on Mrs. Brewster's agenda was to check with each student to see if their parent had signed the booklet, showing what the previous day's lesson had been. Immediately, I was impressed to see how this would have great potential for students and parents to discuss what the lesson was about and open the door for further discussion or questions. The topic of the day's lesson was Know Your Consequences. The lesson provided the students with a wealth of information as well as encouragement to make good choices. The class played a game using a gigantic die. Each number had a question that the student would answer. They had to think about how their action would affect them physically, emotionally, mentally, or socially. During this game, I noticed how involved the students were. There was no embarrassment, no silliness, and they actually looked forward to when it was their turn to roll the die and answer the question. I was quite impressed with how well thought out their answers were. Another part of the Know Your Consequences lesson included information about common STIs. Mrs. Brewster did a fantastic job providing medically accurate information in her deliverance. She discussed 6 different STIs and explained how these could be contracted and treated. While she was explaining the details, Mrs. Carr displayed a picture of the STI on the screen. Once again, all students were attentive and handled this information maturely, with the exception of a few appropriate oohs and ohs, and once in a while a gross. After observing the CPR lesson on a very sensitive and personal topic,
30 seconds.
I left the classroom feeling quite satisfied. It was evident that the students in Vigo County who participate in this program are receiving well-planned, accurate, and scientific-based lessons on sex education. Thank you.
Hannah Wells. Brian Bonet.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Hayworth and Education Board. My name is Brian Bonnet. Tonight I have the privilege of reading letters from 2 Vigo County students. The first is from a former female student. She writes, "As a young person who has taken the CPR classes, I think it is a great educational program that gives teens and students necessary knowledge to have control of their body, their choices, and their future in a non-intimidating way. The takeaway message from the instruction is that sex is a good thing and nothing to be ashamed of. But in order to enjoy it with full freedom, we must treat ourselves and others with respect and understand that the healthiest way to have a sexual relationship is within the safety of a monogamous marriage." The second letter, I have a letter from my 8th grade daughter, Emma. She writes, "I've had 2 years of CPR classes so far. I wasn't excited to learn about these things in school since my mom and dad had already told me all of it. I don't think anyone enjoys this, it's awkward. But it wasn't that bad. The instructor was very nice and seemed like someone we could trust. We learned about the difference between crushes and love, about hormones and how they influence us, and how emotions can complicate things too. She didn't put pressure on us, judge, or shame anyone, but she did explain that abstinence is the safest option. It will protect us from STIs and so many other problems. If we have to learn these things at school, I hope it is always with the CPR program. They make it less awkward and are so considerate to everyone. They really seem to care. Thank you for your time."
Thank you.
Carrie King.
Good evening, Dr. Hayworth and school board members. I am actually reading 2 letters, one from a parent and then one from her son. So this first one is from Carrie Evans, a parent of students in Vigo County. "As the parent of a daughter who is a 2020 high school graduate and a son who is an upcoming 7th grader at a Vigo County school, I have a good amount of experience with the CPR program in our schools. Initially, I was leery. Sex education is such a personal issue, and every parent has their own strongly held beliefs on how they want their children to learn about this subject. I was tempted to opt my daughter out, but after some trusted friends shared their own experiences with the CPR program, I felt secure in allowing my student to attend this class, and I am glad I did. According to both of my children, the information shared and the manner in which it was shared was not overwhelming. It was not over the top, but it also did not skirt around the issue either. Scientific facts were shared regarding STIs, pregnancy, and the human body. Most importantly, kids were encouraged to share their thoughts and concerns regarding sex, and the CPR facilitators responded with helpful and encouraging attitudes. Sex is a hard topic for parents to talk about with their kids. Perhaps even harder is the idea that someone else is going to educate your child on the subject. It's too important to risk doing it incorrectly or unkindly. I was relieved when both of my children came home and reported that it wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be. Awkward, yes, but they both felt cared for and heard in their CPR classes. And sex was less of a taboo subject around our home after that, and more of a fact of life that they better understood. I support keeping the Creating Positive Relationship program in our schools. It is done so well and does not delve into religious or political topics, just the facts presented in a tasteful way. This is exactly what our kids and us as concerned parents need. Thank you, Carrie Evans. This is from Carrie's son, Ben. It is my understanding that some in our community are concerned that the CPR classes talk about God. In reality, they never talk about God.
30 seconds.
They talk about reproduction, our bodies, hormones, and how our bodies work. The teachers only focus on these things. From my time in the class, I did not hear the teachers be judgmental, and everyone was treated respectfully. The reason I think the school corporation needs to keep this program is because kids need to know about reproduction so they can have sex safely. This program teaches us about our bodies and how we should take care of them and about reproduction. CPR teachers were kind and funny, and it made us feel at ease, so we retained more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben Evans.
That will conclude our public comment time for tonight. I greatly appreciate everyone coming in, wearing your mask. I would ask one huge favor. As we depart, I would ask you to put those masks back on until we exit the building. Again, thank you. Thank you for modeling tonight how a community deals with a difficult subject. Thank you so much.